And while the immigration debate is setting the stage for the future of the United States, D.C. is working to tackle America's financial hurricane. Today, President Obama's Debt Commission met to discuss the forecast, including solutions for reducing the national debt. Meanwhile, in a speech just last week, the president said he wanted to ensure American tax dollars aren't wasted.
And the reality is that right now, in these difficult economic times, families across this country are cutting every frill and stretching every dollar as far as they can. And they should expect no less from their government.
So is the government holding up its promise? Maybe not, at least when it comes to some road signs. RT producer Lindsay Garfield has more.
Driving around the streets of Washington, you'll see many signs. Signs advertising construction or rough road ahead. But have you ever seen these signs? Signs promising that the government is putting America back to work. Signs promising new jobs and a new start for many jobless Americans. Whether you're in Washington, D.C. or Cleveland, Ohio, odds are you've seen these big green metal signs, such as this one, or this one. But have you ever wondered how much money is being spent on them? One sign near Washington's Dulles International Airport has caught the attention of taxpayers. The price tag on this sign? $10,000. I took to the streets of Washington to find out what taxpayers thought about these signs.
And are you a taxpayer?
Yes.
So, I mean, how do you feel personally that your taxpayer money is being spent on that?
Cheated. I mean, but this happens all the time. Our money goes to all kinds of ridiculous things that we don't realize. It's throwaway, you know. You can't use them afterwards, so I don't agree with it.
But residents of Washington aren't the only ones voicing concerns about these signs.
Complaints about the amount of money being spent on these road signs have traveled all the way from the streets of Washington to here, the U.S. Capitol, where one lawmaker has even introduced a bill that would cut funding for all future stimulus signs.
Meet Congressman Schock, the author of H.R. 5679, also known as the End the Stimulus Advertisement Act.
Driving by these stimulus signs, I started to think, gee, you know, since when does the federal government promote the fact that they're spending your money? And so my staff and I dove into finding out how much that costs the taxpayers, and we were shocked to learn that in the first year we've already spent tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money simply on those sheet metal signs that you see all around America.
But some D.C. residents don't see anything wrong with these stimulus signs.
I have no problem with the signs. I think it's good that the public is made aware that the Recovery Act funds are being used.
While a Department of Transportation official declined to be interviewed, I received a statement from the agency. They said spending on these signs was minuscule and that signs accounted for only $5 million. But is this figure really accurate? Congressman Schock would argue that the estimate is not even close to what the government is actually spending.
So for the administration to come forward and say, well, we think the number's around $5 million is completely ludicrous.
So in the end, is it unnecessary spending? Or is it a necessary expense in the name of transparency? And does this money even faze taxpayers after footing the bill for a $787 billion stimulus act?
Well, I think it's a sad day in America anytime we're willing to waste tens of millions of dollars.
Whether it's hundreds of dollars or tens of millions of dollars, it's signs like this one behind me that remind Americans that at least in Washington, more are coming. Lindsay Garfield, RT, Washington, D.C.
And earlier I spoke with Max Fradwolf, economist from the New School. He gave me some insight into government spending and what he thinks of these road signs.
Well, it sounds like the Billboard Stimulus Act, and it's sort of funny to put the signs only in Washington, the only place where everyone's been talking only about the stimulus and not about the fact that they're out of work or afraid of losing their home and afraid for their children and their future. It's the only place where people don't need to be reminded, and even though it's a very small amount of money, it's tears in an ocean of debt here, it is still sad, and it's a reminder of just how bizarre sometimes the Washington mindset is when it comes to how to spend the public's precious and dwindling national resource of tax tax revenues and unfortunately often borrowing, because it is the U.S. government that's making the spending. It's been increasingly bizarre, troubling, painful, both for me as a citizen as well as an economist, to see what we're deciding is precious and worth spending our money on here and what we're deciding isn't, like teachers and firefighters and proper benefits for our veterans. I would add, however, that I live in this small provincial hamlet of Manhattan, where this tiny audience here in the city is apparently not worthy of the signs, because for better or for worse, I have yet to ever see one of these signs on the subway, in Times Square, or anywhere here in the provincial, tiny, edge of the universe hamlet, New York City, that I call home. We're already spending way too much, so we're spending about 1.4 to 1.5 trillion, so that's 14 or 1,500 billion dollars more in this year, 2010, than we're going to bring in tax revenues. So I don't really think it's so much about more and less. I think those are increasingly ideological debates. I think we need to spend our money very differently, and I'd like to see any future stimulus and future government spending be done very differently than we've been seeing the spending done in the last several years, actually the last 20 years, to be honest with you. I think there are a lot of areas